Truth is the enemy to the Matrix world. The world is a vampire set to drain, sang Billy Corben in the first line of his hit Smashing Pumpkins song with the chorus. Despite all my rage, I am still just a rat in a cage. Even Ozzy sang the truth in his early song, War Pigs. Generals gather in their masses, just like witches at black masses. No rhyme there, but that's true. It's what they are. Yet, of course, for self-protection, he added on, "Oh, Lord, yeah." And whether he was already or not, he became a well-loved Heyoka of the dark side. Thus, later as a solo artist, he sang in the last verse of his song Crazy Train the insanely hopeful line, "Maybe it's not too late if we can learn how to love and forget how to hate." Soon, his brilliant fellow Ophiuchus or Sagittarius young guitarist Randy Rhoads died at 23. Is that the youngest death of a famous, brilliant artist? Of course, when Bob Marley and John Lennon told the truth a lot, and as famous popular music stars spread philosophies of peace and unity, they just had to be assassinated for it. As 1970s millionaire music stars painting a target on their own back from the dark side's perspective. Jimi Hendrix had a great way of sharing the truth of love, but he was easier to take out than them because he was into all the drugs. Bob Marley had to be given cancer in a gifted pair of fancy shoes, according to a YouTube video I found years ago. A man with dreads who lived in Jamaica made in his car, claiming to have met a dude who Bob had given those shoes to, and he said he could never wear them because he felt that, electronic gadget in the shoes that caused him to get cancer. You cannot become a huge musical star and tell the truth. That's not allowed, because look who controls or controlled Hollywood. You can't do that without consequences. Sly Stone became a big-time cokehead after having so many wonderful lyrics about spiritual basic truth. Crosby, Stills, and Nash somehow were gentle enough to get away with it. I think, for what it's worth, was vague enough, and I think he might have also had to move to Florida for that reason. A few lines, or with CSN, a few lines of being extremely cryptic was a necessity. Since Robert Johnson magically transformed into the greatest Delta bluesman ever, after he supposedly made a deal with the devil, everybody knows to be a big star, you'd have to sell your soul to the devil or join the 27 Club and die young of a drug overdose. Especially if you wanted to share love or truth in popular music. Oh, I forgot, Bradley Nowell of the band Sublime and Robert Johnson, they both were probably, I think, younger than 27. it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I gave this stupid idea that I needed to join the 27 Club and tell the truth and share the love and die of drugs. It wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I realized this was a mind control just for someone like me. And it was a stupid, dumb idea. And also, I loved wisdom. You know, I began reading Castaneda when I was 16. I read the Tao Te Ching when I was 18. And so by the time I was in my early 30s and I got my first copy of the Nag Hammadi Library, I already felt like I was in love with wisdom itself. And I liked the idea of getting old and wise, a good cliche. Which the Matrix does its best to prevent this, however. They don't want anyone to be wise. An old financial wage slave or NPC won't have very much of their own wisdom if all they did was pay for the box and then retire. The Matrix does its best to prevent this, however, with its escalating forcing of financial slavery. And then, of course, we have all of the archontic thought inserts and pervasive pushing of the Abrahamic faith-based death cults. And now the new religion, the scientism death cults. And of course, the religion of money has grown, not just because they forced nearly every person on this planet or this place to do it, but because they're so good at the horrific psychological crime we call coercion and forcing it on everyone. The religion of money has grown to a dizzying new height in the era of the digital technocracy and its escalating panopticon, putting a former Hollywood reality TV show star, business mogul, billionaire, landlord who literally sits on a golden toilet as our president in the White House. Wow. The idiots who got hoodwinked by the poetic yet repugnant and spiritually retarded salvationist Q-drop movement's savior in his second term in the Oval Office has pushed the incredibly evil plans of the Fourth Reich. Yeah, in my very first ever YouTube video, I mentioned that Klaus Schwab's daddy was a Nazi officer. And you think the fruit falls far from the tree? The evil plans of the Fourth Reich Industrial Revolution, a full-scale control of everyone and everything, Agenda 2030. No one could ever say that our adversary isn't extremely ambitious. The Internet of Things, digital IDs. Did you ever play the old video game Pokemon Go? If you did, you were being used to build the surveillance state. Isn't that strange? And now we have, in order to fly, if you don't have a passport, you need a digital ID, a fake ID called the Real ID. It's not a fake ID, but it's a forcing of a technocracy. Bill Gates was trying to get them to force that on us for years before they finally agreed to force it. Digital IDs, central bank digital currency called stablecoin in the U.S. set to begin in 2027. Silly con artist techno-feudalism forced upon all of U.S. No, you and I aren't as popular, rich, or loved as those singers or politicians or religious truth tellers, or as influential and as known as JFK or MLK Jr. So what is the new method of attacking truth tellers? Internet censorship and algorithmic control will do the job. During the lockdowns, we saw the likes of David Icke, Laura Eisenhower, Eric Berg, and other uber popular truth tellers get banned. And Laura got a note from YouTube saying, "You are banned forever, for life." I got mostly well hidden since I published Is Yahweh a Narcissistic Predator Entity? And honestly, when I went back and watched that, I cringed. Not because of the title, but because of how bad the quality of the content was. So maybe I have improved after 700 videos. You'd hope to think that would be the case. Why did we get the story of Yeshua, or the actual historical man came to be known as Christ, getting nailed to a cross 2,000 plus years ago, as he had told the truth in parable and literally knocking over the table on the money changers, and try to explain to them that the Father I talk about is not your Father. Well, because all the way back then, he had to be made an example of what would happen if you were a charismatic or popular teacher, even if you were from one of the ruling bloodlines, like John F. Kennedy, and you decided to tell everyone the truth and empower the Goyim. How dare they? Yeah, and after that very, very true title, got to eyeball, lessen my eyes on my content to a great degree. I had strikes, the dreaded YouTuber's punishment, and weeks forced off for making, kicked off for weeks for videos I made, which naively told the truth about some of the crimes of the pandemic without a medical MD or books for sale, or being someone who had already been established, and I was recording them from a campsite. I sure was willfully ignorant and naive for that, eh? A few years later, Laura Eisenhower and David Icke were allowed back on. I don't know whether they were invited or they just tried again, were allowed. They were allowed back on YouTube without any apology, of course. I guess YouTube needed the money, as they both have sold books and lots of tickets. David Icke wrote a lot of books. It's freedom of speech, not freedom of reach, said Elon Musk in regards to this issue. And this is why you ain't going to see this face on X. Because that would be truly speaking to the police interrogation, digital online room, two-way mirror where no one sees it at all. Try finding me on Instagram. Whereas I, the lucky grandson of a 33-degree Freemason, a disabled dude who recorded hundreds of talks in a campsite, tent and hotel rooms, that is 700 talks, nearly 700 talks, was never allowed to speak to even the hundreds of folks again, except for on a very few amount of occasions, like, unless I was a good boy and I talked only about psychology or astrology, that's kosher. And yeah, thanks guys for, letting me know, that I'm welcome here, and not so subtle of a way, but only if I stick to the topics that are okay. Yeah. The algorithm is that complex. Plus, in a forced 3D financial slavery plane net and the internet, which was designed in part by DARPA, who amongst the money slaves will even give a boy man in a campsite an ear or eyes? So few, maybe they would all just be in the hundreds, even if the algorithm was not such a popularity and money-focused contest. Because the vast majority of even the still sold or essence intact flesh suits, but force-fed, brainwashed by the old TV media, that is if you're old enough to have grown up with TV like those in my generation, still think, even so many in the freedom and truther and disclosure communities are still so mind controlled by capitalism that the Archon parasite in their subconscious mind will tell them, oh, don't ever check that guy up. I'm pretty sure I've had to give out 1,000 business cards to get 100 subscribers or 100 people to even watch, because the false self is always going to tell them, why should you listen to that guy? There's still so many that the Gnostics would call psychic or pneumatic souls, even, who are controlled or steered by the old TV media still to think only those with letters behind their names, books for sale, or an approved huge audience, which is often largely somewhat fake, deserve a listen. When completely AI-generated channels, YouTube channels hit the scene in 2025, like hundreds of them, they could amass hundreds of thousands of views and subscribers in weeks or months, no problem. Until more of the psychic and pneumatic souls, as the Gnostics called them, had enough. And a lot of people were even making videos complaining and talking shit about it. And, I myself unsubscribed to the several of these weird robot-generated channels that looked like they were good. Because I just got sick of hearing AI tell me things, even if it was a slick, rich English-sounding voice. Well, especially that they'd always use that same voice. Then YouTube, which is ever changing its tactics and battle plan and its plan of operation to modernize, change it up. They began to allow more old school channels of organic talking human heads to get popular as a counterbalance. So if you started a YouTube channel in about 2025 or so, and you're really good at self-censoring, of course they all had to be very good at self-censoring. Yeah, you might get a big channel if you had a niche, something you really knew a lot about. As for me, a rather stubborn person, I never gave up. Filled at least 11 of these notebooks with explicit details of the brutal truth about the matrix systems we've all been forced into, in as great of a detail as I could, to see like 10 or 20 views each, most of them. How will I ever know how many folks actually watch those videos when I've actually caught the censors lowering views? The talks where I did a good job would get the number kibosh. Some of them got into the hundreds, I don't know. It's a contest, an eyeball and ear contest, and a large part of the whole. It's a game. A large part of the YouTube game is, can you win the contest? What is the moral here? Well, if you start a YouTube channel, you're better off doing it because you love to share information, to help, to serve, to entertain, and that cliche of even just one person that you appreciate sharing videos. And do not judge a YouTube video by the amount of views it got or its popularity. Honestly, I've learned that means jack shit or zilch in regards to whether or not it's true or valuable to me. And I've subscribed to YouTube channels of every size because I feel that Tony Sayers and the guy whose channel is called The Real People are wrong when they say that just because somebody has a huge audience means they're controlled opposition. Well, yeah, the vast fucking majority of them are, but not necessarily. Or you are being a mind-controlled moron if you think, the amount of views something gets is why it's legitimate, if it's popular. Or you're mind-controlling yourself to think it's only worthy if it gets a few views. It's kind of the thinking of a collapsed narcissism. Well, or martyrdom value. Oh, well, they were martyred, or they're hidden, so they must be more valuable. You have to judge, or you have to discern the value that each channel gives you on its own, and not by comparing it to others, really. Am I guilty of clicking on and even subscribing to huge channels? Of course, the algorithm pushes them. Yes. Have I succumbed to this? This even happens when they've got, 20,000 subscribers, but they are not channels. The ones that I've subscribed to with millions of subscribers, most of them are not channels that have to do with the pure truth. There are things that I watch for information that is not so much political or spiritual. They're about other interests, usually. I have like state statistics or real estate, fake estate, the facts of cultures and the facts and Peter Santinello shows how there's hundreds of different ways of life in the USA. So yeah, especially when they start talking about social, political, or spiritual things on those channels, it's usually some lame mainstream media narrative, and the YouTuber with millions of subscribers' opinions are always, most of them sound like they're pasted on by the fucking mainstream media, but I enjoy them for other reasons. The only big channels I know of that tell the truth are, of course, Jimmy Dore and Inspired in all capital letters, and they both, of course, mastered the clickbait title and somehow became trusted to the algorithm, making a lot of money, I guess, or due to being a famous comedian with a degree in political science and a handsome country singer who both know how to use PowerPoint well, articulately and succinctly say the truth in a very compelling way, and also work with teams and sell stuff. And of course, I still like David Icke or Icky, despite what Tony Sayers says. And yes, he's a slick writer. And it's easy to see why Tony thinks he's a controlled opposition agent, that he could be, as he says, a new age guru and sell millions of books telling the truth. Or maybe the rebellious meat puppet is right about Passio and Icke, that they will leave out certain facts. But I don't really think that. I think that they're jealous. I mean, envious is the word. I got 95% of my subscribers, as I said a moment ago, by guerrilla marketing, handing out cards, homemade business cards. My friend Keith McHenry, who inspired this video, doesn't even try to grow his YouTube channel. Even though he's appeared on Jimmy Dore's show, he still has less subscribers than me because he doesn't make very many videos, and because he's got stacks of evidence that the powers that think they are controlling it all really don't want the things he has to say to get out. Speaking of stacks, he writes his Keith McHenry writes and posts his articles on his Substack, which I recommend if you want to hear his stinging commentary about the actual truth, about the nasty technocracy takeover plans, because he knows how YouTube is about the truth. The founder of the former Santa Cruz anarchist group the Santa Cruz voluntarist who was jailed for 2 weeks, basically for just about nothing. Aside from the intention the Dark Lord's minions had in the agencies and to stop his anarchist movement, his peaceful and respectful anarchy movement, where every week at those events he would often end his motivational talks by, or begin them by saying the non-aggression principle, which is the non-religious form of the original rule, natural law. You can do anything you want if you don't harm anyone else's stuff. I always add their spirit and your own spirit. But they had to get rid of the Santa Cruz voluntarists by locking up David James Rodriguez because he was a popular truth teller with the following, and it sadly worked. He still has a YouTube channel called Voluntary Living. And even though he has like over 20,000 subscribers, his videos will supposedly get about the same view count as most of mine had, like 10, 20 views. Yeah. So believable. Believable. Not. Those truths can't get to the masses. Tony Sayers, who I just mentioned a little minute ago, he began a decade ago, before all this crazy censorship began, and wrote a few books, or a book. So he got about that same level of subscriber count. Dr. Kim said, when she still had an active channel, she said her ex-boyfriend who was in the CIA told her that, oh, we never let people get over 30,000 if they tell the explicit hardcore truth. I don't know if that's true, but it looks like that most often is the case. Tony began years before the censorship was ramped up so we could get more views. The Russian genius Marina Karlova, on the other hand, who just began recently, was just too brilliant and good at wordplay and self-censorship to be hidden. She was able to glitch the censors and hack the matrix by being very professional, a good capitalist, having several businesses. She even wrote a book with ChatGPT, but she programmed ChatGPT to research outside of the box. It's pretty good. Cordyceps, the neural network that invades you. She compares the matrix and the operating systems of the demiurgos to the cordyceps mushrooms, who will, grow around an ant and suffocate it while it grows, feeding on its life. Again, with her brilliant mind, she came up with a perfect analogy and book title there. She was just too good at wordplay and self-censorship to be hidden. And she's from Russia, which helps. She figured out how to hack in, and her channel now is called Maledicta Gets Eyes. But she's a rare, exceptional exception to this rule. The vast majority of us who speak the clear, brutal truth have just a few hundred to a few thousand subscribers. And I'm not talking about this because I'm so focused on that. You know, of course, it's influenced by having my son in the 10th house in my zodiac birth chart. And yeah. The vast majority who tell you the actual truth only have a couple thousand subscribers at best, like my friends Anika, whose channel is called The Kismet Spiral, and Joshua S. John. Funnily enough, having succumbed to watching some of these silly how to grow your channel videos, which are mostly garbage from someone in my situation's perspective, both of them do this thing they say to never do. Both of them are Capricorn suns who will go like a month or more between uploads, and it doesn't mess with their view count at all. You know why? Because they're really articulate and hard-hitting Capricorns telling the hardcore truth. Real spirits like that. And also, since it's become their routine, their subscribers are used to it, so it doesn't screw it up for them. It never fucks up their audience count. Perhaps it's their self-protection. The truth hurts. The machine beast made of lies. Their talks are so honest about the real, brutal, harsh human fans will not disown them, you know. Will not unsubscribe or forget to watch every single video because their channels are for people like my channel who are really into facing the real truth. So real people won't just not watch them just because they spent weeks or months in between uploads. No, instead, we appreciate every single one of their videos because they're devoted to the actual truth. The real ensouled humans, the pneumatic souls as the ancient Gnostics called them, want the truth. And some of us are even willing to die, willing to risk it all, willing to risk everything in this material realm to learn and to share and give away the real truth that can potentially, like the cliche says, set us free or free us to some degree. Whereas the lying AI Gnostic slop channels unleashed beginning around 2025 they get hundreds of thousands of views and teach you a bunch of garbage mixed with the truth, like the demiurge created everything. Whereas on the other hand, Miguel Connor is a brilliant Taurus capitalist writer who also began his YouTube channel like 10-15 years ago and does great work. Obviously works really hard and uses the AI, makes shorts and does interviews with a bunch of brilliant writers. So yes, Aeon Byte, Gnostic Radio it's called, gets a lot of views. They're selling books. And, you know, capitalism makes channels a lot more trustworthy to the algorithm. True rebels who aren't selling stuff are not so okay and trusty here. I read 12 of the lesser-known Nag Hammadi books on my channel, and why am I even having to mention this? Because Look how few views they supposedly got. I want you, if you haven't already, to check it out and see if you can get something from what these lovers of the real, harsh, and beautiful truth said in their books 2,000 years ago. The real revolution, in the vast majority of its mere existence, will not be televised on YouTube, or at least it will be vastly minimized. The Satanists, Luciferians, the Zionists, liars, deceivers, cult leaders, and the New Age gurus who feed you a bunch of meditation techniques mixed with spiritual bypassing tropes will be propped up with thousands of even fake subscribers, bot subscribers, and bot views to give the impression that they're real popular and doing really good work. Liars who are good at lying will get promoted in politics, religion, social media, and the Matrix realm. This rainstorm is entirely fake. I briefly rode around on my bike doing some anarchist activist ranting when I saw the planes had circled round the place yesterday afternoon to build this rainstorm so much that just in one afternoon it looked just like Saturn. I was saying, funny, I ran into Keith right while I was ranting on my bicycle, and I said, you know, it's not enough to get these Hasidic rabbis to strap that little black cube with the scripture in it to their third eye when they pray, and to get Muslims to circle counterclockwise around the black cube in Mecca. And it wasn't enough to successfully get more than half of the flesh suits or whatever spirits are in them to take their insane injection experiment. Geoengineering is an equal opportunity horrific enslavement agent if it's allowed to keep going. That just to create this rainstorm, they had to make it look just like Saturn. And that's what it looks like, you know, one of the many reasons they do geoengineering after, you know, ramping it up after decades of telling us we have a problem with global warming, to prepare our minds to think it was God, humans are so fucking dumb. Not just with Abrahamic religions, not just with the government and financial slavery, but to think cloud seeding with aluminum dust, cheap heavy metals, to dump really toxic stuff on us is a good idea because it's too warm. I mean, humans are so fucking dumb. NPCs and Hilux souls are so fucking dumb. The fact that it still even exists. I mean, the state of New Hampshire, which according to the silly IQ test is the smartest state, outlawed geoengineering years ago, and Tennessee outlawed it a couple years ago. But how can those states enforce it unless they have millions of dollars to invest in, police and planes that can go after, with the courage to go after Lockheed Martin employees or the big boys planes dumping this filth? Rain like this never happens in late May. in the West Coast. I don't believe I've rarely seen, maybe like a South Carolina rain, like 30 minutes. One May out of 2 Mays in a decade for 30 minutes, but this has been going all day or most of the day. This is a completely geoengineered rainstorm. But some of the technocrat, silicon, scumbag, 1% controllers, when they first got rich in the dot-com boom, they bought mansions along Westcliff, and they are such sick, devil-worshipping psychopaths that they offered $200,000 more than the asking price for these Westcliff mansions to jack up the cost of living in Santa Cruz. How could the cost of living in Santa Cruz be as low as it was 25 years ago? They couldn't have that when they moved in. We're talking about some sick, inverted scumbag, Epstein Island visiting control freaks. Geoengineering can be used to make the weather good everywhere. Now, that would also include a lot of nasty residue from all these toxic heavy metals. But that's not the plan for the techno-fascist totalitarian takeover. Now, is it? The Internet of Things, one world government panopticon isn't about making it decent or making the weather nice. The prison planet Lush Farm, the second operating system, the Matrix world, the hijacked and stolen realm, is about loose extraction, torture, control, and abuse. And being big, bad, bully tyrants over everyone and everything. And that makes them good to their morally retarded overlords who are very good at terrifying us all into littleness if we don't become evil tyrants. Oh, ain't God good? Good at filth, good at shitting on us all. They could do this kind of fake rainstorm to Arizona and save it from drying up. But of course, the fake gods of the 1%, the hell know him, the Archon parasites, have to have it all as their big, nasty, suffering pit of psychological hell loose farm. Everything has to feed into the jaws of the devil. That's what's important to God. All lives have to include massive suffering. The truth will not be allowed to get to the goyim, and the 99% must remain ignorant slave farm animals. If you asked the blue bloods, the fake royals, the government, or their vicious, blood-demanding, off-planet or interdimensional or interplanet parasite junior gods, wherever the fuck it is that they reside, in their soulless, heartless, demiurgic, morally dead, zombie AI brains, we are all here just for their profit and, of course, loose extraction. Never mind the fact that they collectively stole, used coercion, intimidation, killing, and torture to get all of their power via wars of conquest. We're all done under false pretexts and lies. Our country grew large and fat via overseas violent, coercive theft, using these parasite junior gods tactics on islanders and dark-skinned nations that had lower IQs, that were good-natured people who lived in harmony with nature in a very unpolluted state, who didn't have, very few of them had a lick of disrespect, probably. Just like when Christ Sophia first encountered these forces of darkness, they didn't know how to respond. They tragically believe the big boys were going to help them become rich and affluent when they just simply enslaved them, desecrated their land, and took over and put a U.S. military base there to remind them who's in charge now. Destroyed their economy to make our country fatter. Oh, ain't the dark side good at their tactics? The operations they attempted to force on the entire world 5 and 6 years ago worked so well. So well on over half the population, because since the archontic possession of Abraham, according to this guy that was just on the Typical Skeptic podcast the other day, Frank said, sounds right, the coercive, violent, lying powers of the false self-gods grew and grew. The trauma-bonded and Stockholm syndromed humans became more and more hybridized within these evil ET races. Our once originally peaceful species, according to Wes Penra, was known as the Namulu Christos human race before the Anus got here, was invaded by aliens, starting, according to walk-in psychic Lisa Renee's research, about 1 million years ago. And the vampires have taken over our place successfully by building salvationist religions, governments, and new technocracy. Again, under great duress, under great threats, just like these false self-gods under great threats. What these massively well-organized and funded terroristic thieves didn't factor half a decade ago, especially, is the original human race's courage, that we also will never give up. As I often say, the devil's greatest trick is no longer convincing folks that he doesn't exist. It is that they never give up. Our Congress is in the pocket of Israel. They spent over $30 million just to get rid of Thomas Massie, and one of those few honest congressmen who follows the Constitution, who wants our nation to be free and respectful and decent. They spent $30 million to get him out of Congress. That's a lot of money. Just to get him out of there. That's how much they hate a popular leader in the government who's willing to risk it all to bring transparency and truth to the table. The Matrix abhors the Constitution. It hates that document because it codified some of the original version of reality when we, as a species in our original form, were actually given free will, and they hate that. Rand Paul told Fauci in the good versus evil Capricorn sun sign confrontation of that age a couple years back, we have stacks of evidence that you created it. With all due respect, Senator, you're wrong. And I was paid $450,000 a year by the big boys to do only good things. I'm a hero. You know, Anthony Fauci inferred. He didn't mention how much money he made, but, you know, that's what he was trying to infer. I have Mercury in Capricorn retrograde in the 11th house in my natal zodiac birth chart, yet I've made socially deadly mistakes according to the system on at least several occasions, but I will never quit telling the truth. Not to be a narcissistic individual, but feel free to watch my over 600 videos. Here comes just as soon as I hear more rain pummel, I hear a plane. I hear the planes, then I hear the rains. So often. Feel free to binge watch. If it's not going to mess anything up in your 3D life. Hundreds of videos that I mean, there's at least 666 videos, many of them, probably 500 of them, that I wrote extensive notes for and read, that articulately describe a lot of the entire takeover operation, about how these masterful alien or interdimensional parasites, with their great, amazing degree of understanding of human psychology and how to manipulate and control and terrify us into compliance, and how these extremely psychologically advanced parasites and humanoid thieves stole most of the realm. Dare to care. Watch an entire playlist I made about the real truth. If you're seriously strong and also disabled or retired, it's not going to mess with your taking care of your needs. Or watch the playlist over the course of weeks if it takes that long. I want you to become aware of the truth. That's why I do this. What is it that makes slavery so legitimate? And why must we all be tools of a prison? Make your own videos telling the truth if you have the courage. Yeah, I have to accept making books because the truth must be told. But to the scum at the top of the evil, fake God inverted Matrix, Hell Realm, Loose Farm, Plane, and Internet of all suffering things to eat, it is the enemy. If you're still here and you haven't Yet dare to subscribe, like, comment, share, and dare to care.